Do you ever feel like you've been missing out on your own life? Maybe you've been asking yourself questions like this of how to overcome the heavy, bitter, and often shameful feeling of having wasted your time, or maybe even worse, having wasted an entire year or multiple years in a row. Today we're going to have more of an advanced level conversation about this concept of how to get over the past and live the most in the present with the support of two rare books. This one is from 1977 and it's about healthy shame, and this one's from 1996 and it's about rage and anger, but we're going to be focusing on resentment, because the key to not wasting your time is to access the pain and turn the pain into wisdom to prevent further loss. I'm going to be breaking down this question in hopefully as practical a video as I can possibly make, and fundamentally, especially at this special time of year, I want you to make the most out of your week, your month, and your year ahead. Fundamentally, there's two halves to this conversation. Firstly, there's the acceptance, beginning with the recognition that you have indeed wasted a certain amount of time in your life. Maybe your youth is behind you, maybe you spent too long in a bad relationship, or maybe your career came to a dead end and you bit down on your tongue and didn't move for too many years in a row. There needs to be an acceptance of the mistake before you can get to the second half of the conversation, which is learning how to use resentment as a tool of wisdom. So let's focus in on this first half of the conversation. Today's questioner was asking about this feeling of how to prevent further loss in the future. You need to understand that the shame and the heaviness and the bitterness that you feel when you look back on the past is not to be repressed. Shame is something which isn't a universally negative trait. And if you've watched videos on the internet, or maybe even myself in videos when I've been talking about shame, it's easy to compartmentalize shame as something which is fundamentally artificial, socially constructed, or otherwise a trauma-based energy which should be disregarded over your shoulder and you can joyfully move on into an authentic and integrated life, but it's just not true. There is such a thing as healthy shame. Let me bring you this quote out from a book, which I'll need to show you the front cover because I don't use hardcovers. It's called Shame, Exposure, and Privacy. I'm not sure if it comes up. Very minimalistic cover right there by Carl Schneider, written in 1977. And the reason that this book came to my mind, as well as the other book, is that on New Year's Eve, I actually laid out the 104 books for my inner work course coming out this year, so I did a big library reshuffle, and this book leaped out from the hidden gold between the shelves. There's this wonderful quote here that hopefully changes your perspective on what shame can do for you, and at least opening the idea that shame can be healthy and adaptive. Joining now at the end of a paragraph of people who embrace shame, and this is what Carl says. In contrast, those who regard shame as artificial, repressive, and essentially a social control mechanism, and who are impressed with its pathological and destructive manifestations, focus on the negative judgment in shame and overlook the deeper, positive dimension. This is a rare book and you'll have to get it for yourself, but the essential thrust of the entire text is that shame indicates a degree of consciousness. There's socially constructed consciousness, and there's all kinds of morality around what is and isn't shameful. For example, controversial issues around how much skin to show, or who you can love, or how you can express yourself in public. Those aren't the issues that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the deeper moral consciousness, which comes about almost as a soulful impetus when you've done something wrong. I'll put the book down and explain what I mean, and this will all come together on the topic of wasting time, so please bear with me, but we'll frame out the philosophy just a little bit. If you've done something wrong and no one watched you do it, most obvious dramatic example, you take someone's life in a secret location, you're never found out, your conscience is going to eat away at you if you have any degree of genuine humanness inside of you. There are psychopathic people out there, a very small number of people who feel no regret and no remorse. If you were to do something evil, you would feel the weight of it. But that's a very extreme example. A lesser example might be something like your child comes up to you and they want a certain gift for their birthday, and you say to them, sorry, we can't afford that this year. maybe we'll get something else, and you know that little sense of shame, that feeling of tightness in your throat, that feeling of sinking energy comes up because you know that you gambled away the money in your secret gambling addiction, or you otherwise stayed in the dead-end career and you haven't had any kind of significant financial gains for the last 3 or 4 years in a row, which is why you can't afford it. There's a narrative of social shame of, you don't need to be constantly earning lots of money, and part of trauma healing is unplugging yourself from unhealthy, compulsive societal narratives. But the deep shame, and this is separating out the emotion of secret addictions, avoidant behaviors, and repressive, time-wasting activities, comes up as a teacher. And if you can learn to listen to that in the day by day, and also reflect on the years spent not listening to that emotion, you've got a gift to be able to really change the trajectory of your life. Another example, for example, 2 examples right there. Let's say you're somebody whom you're in a relationship and your partner's gone to bed. A really common one, I hear this from my clients. Your partner's gone to bed and you're staying up late on questionable adult websites, and then you slink off into the bedroom and you know what you did. It's not necessarily overwhelming, but that little shameful pattern there, is it the voice of your consciousness? Yes, I would say it is. And it's not the particular example. It could be many examples related to lying or bending the truth or otherwise playing less than you should. Playing less in the sense of being smaller than you should be. Not choosing to listen to that moment. That's where people get stuck. I can't give you every single example. The fundamental point for the first half of this video is that if you want to move beyond the wasted years, move beyond the feeling of having kind of hurt yourself, realistically hurting yourself with a series of small choices, you need to embrace that shame can be separated into negative toxic shame and healthy life affirmative shame. Because if you can then take that healthy life affirmative shame into a daily teacher, you unlock the power of resentment. And this is the second half of the video, and resentment is a tool which I draw upon on realistically a daily, or at least every other day, at the very least every single week. I use resentment as a tool or a compass to guide me towards correct decision making. Because I do a little resentment check more or less every single day when I rate my day out of 10 in terms of emotional fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And if I have too many days in a row which dip below an 8 out of 10, especially if they go to a 6 out of 10 territory, I know that I'm stacking resentments on the inside. And this is something which you really can't escape from. If you're showing up to work, staying in a relationship, otherwise neglecting your body and your health, and you have that feeling that comes up randomly in the afternoon, suddenly on a walk in the evening of, oh, this is crap, I hate this, and that frustration comes up, that surge of energy. If it doesn't express, if it doesn't become a change, the angry, upwards rising energy turns cold, and that becomes resentment. And then resentment starts to become this hot, cold, bubbling inferno of unexpressed potential. Resentment ties to shame, and there's an interesting connection which is often lost when it comes to emotional intelligence, and this does really relate to wasting time. A bit more of a philosophical video, but hopefully you're still following me. If you've accessed healthy shame, based on an awareness of the mistakes that you've made in the past, and an awareness that when you go into sinful or otherwise misdirected or otherwise wasteful, otherwise repressive behaviors in the day-to-day experience, you've got such an incredible, uniquely personalized way to prevent you wasting time in the future. That's one side of it. And the resentment emotion, which isn't the shame emotion, the resentment, the anger, the frustration, the feeling of this isn't working, I hate this, I deserve better than this relationship, just that small voice. And for some people, this is a massive voice. For me personally, I didn't have to unlock my anger, I actually needed to unlock my sadness and my tears. Often this is the case with many men. It's easier for us to shout and get frustrated and punch through the wall. Often much harder to let tears roll down our face. The inverse can be true for women, that usually it's easier to cry and harder to let out that striking gesture from more of a bioenergetic perspective. Generalizations, but they tend to apply. Once you've got resentment and anger, you don't want to confuse that anger always needs to express outwards. Resentment can be a hidden teacher. So let me bring out a quote from this 1996 book, Anger, Madness and Daimonic. And this is, I don't know if you've ever seen this on the internet or recommended elsewhere. It's really one of those rare books that, yeah, you have to get before they're gone, but you're going to love this one. a nice quote here about deep-rooted rage, and it'll really tie the video together, and it's referring to some of the work at the start of the 20th century. Don't need to get too academic, I'll just read the quote about deep-rooted rage. Deep-rooted rage that gradually turns into a hard-to-shake hatred of oneself, one's world, and of the people populating it. This bitter resentment towards life, a life devoid of meaning, significance, freedom, dignity, passion, and love, is intimately tied to Sigmund Freud's idea of thanatos, a death instinct, which drives one to destroy life, as well as to Goethe's satanic spirit of negation. When we speak of someone as being a negative person, we might as well be describing the morbid consequences, key sentence here, the morbid consequences of chronic, unresolved, festering resentments of this sort. This isn't a book about trauma work, it is a psychological exploration of how to work with anger, but that chronic, seething, unexpressed hostility will make you sick. And you know it's there. If you see those little hints, those moments of sudden frustration, and then the repressive, avoidant, escapist behaviors of one addiction or any kind of covering up behavior, and you don't follow through, you are shooting yourself in the foot. You're going to keep wasting time if you don't learn from your resentments. And the way that I do this practically, this is the only real practical advice for the video of how to not waste time this year and the decade ahead. Measure your resentments. I filter almost every medium to major decision in my life based on resentments. Do I want to have this call with this person on this day or this day? Would I be resentful about this? Do I want to sign this client? Would I be resentful about this? Do I want to take on this video topic, this particular question? Would I feel resentful in the moment of filming the lesson itself? And that might seem extreme. And if you misunderstand that being that I have a fundamentally default negative bias towards, just hating on life, that's not the point at all. I'm very optimistic and very hopeful at my core. But that hopefulness, that naivety, means that my personal challenge is I tend to avoid my negative feelings, and my resentment needs to be brought to the surface in a really conscious way. And it's almost like you could personify resentment being a certain little gremlin crossing their arms in your psyche, imagining like a little red devil, not dangerous, but like they're kind of there, and you know that eventually they're going to uncross their arms, they're going to grow in size, and it's going to be an unconscious outburst if you don't listen to what they want to communicate with you. And rarely is it a devil. It's often an inner child or some other more positive archetypal part, and they're wearing the mask of the devil. But when they're crossing their arms, you better take a moment just to check in. Okay, Mr. Client, I will just sleep on this for one more night, and then we'll agree to the 4-month journey. I'll speak to you tomorrow. And then I go and check in with my devil. Hey, do you want to work with this person? If they're doing this and they're saying no way they're so demanding, or no way they've got the completely different value system, and I repressed that voice, I've just signed myself up for 4 months of resentments because I made an agreement without listening to a key part of myself. That's one example based on my life, but you can also see this in different relationships, especially difficult relationship conversations, and also your own behaviors when you know at the end of the day, not that you're punching yourself and getting yourself down, that you've built a series of small resentments because of your untaken action or your poor choices. Don't let that build over time. There's a clearing out period that might take a couple of months to really look at the past and really reassess your life right now, but resentment can be a real tool. Measure your resentments, the medium and the large resentments, but also the small resentments, and try and stack up your life in a non-resentful way, and also listening to healthy shame behind the scenes. These two books together, Shame, Exposure and Privacy from 1977, Anger, Madness and Demonic from 1996, will give you much deeper explorations into this entire topic than I can possibly cover in a single video, and I'm trying to weave it all back into a very relatable example of time slipping through your fingers and feeling like you've wasted time. You don't need to repeat the pattern, but to break the pattern, you need to go into deeper unconscious territory and do some genuine shadow work about the unresolved patterns, which usually means a lacking emotional intelligence of being able to listen in on the various voices that are coming up every day. And over time, you shift the patterns. You don't wake up 3 years from now having, oh no, I wasted my time, because you checked in with yourself every single day. Consistent, healthy, self-loving introspection informed by positive emotions and negative emotions and ambivalent emotions, ambivalent, two emotional textures like shame or like resentment. Resentment, what if it was positive? What if resentment was a teacher? It can be that way, and I hope this video has helped. Leave your comments down in the comment section if you've got any more practical advice I missed out in this video. There's really good community building down there, and I want to really focus on that this year. Make sure to reply to other people. Let's keep helping each other out, and in the meantime, join me over on the next video where we're going to be exploring an interesting topic, which topic are we doing? Money. We're doing money.